Three women walked past the same wallet on the same sidewalk on the same blistering Houston afternoon. Two of them made a choice that confirmed everything a billionaire already believed about people. But the third one, a single mother with a tear in her shoe and a hungry child on her hip, did something so quiet, so unexpected, that it forced a man who had stopped believing in kindness to question every wall he had built around his heart over the last 20 years of his life. This isn't a story about money. Not really. It's a story about what people do when they think no one is watching. About the choices that reveal who we really are when there are no cameras, no consequences, no applause. It's about a billionaire who set out to prove the world was selfish and found himself standing in front of a woman who proved him wrong without ever raising her voice. A woman who didn't know he was watching. A woman who didn't need to know. 3 wallets. 3 women. 3 choices. And one single mother who didn't just return a wallet that afternoon. She returned something that man had lost a very long time ago. Something he didn't even know he had been missing. Something no amount of money in any bank account on earth could have bought back for him. Stay with me until the end of this story, because what happens in the final minutes, what gets revealed on a small bronze plaque 6 months later, will change the way you look at strangers on the street for the rest of your life. I promise you that. But before we begin, if this story already has your attention, do me one small favor. Hit that like button below this video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story like this one, and drop the name of your city in the comments. I love seeing where this community is growing from all over the world, from small towns to big cities, from one country to another. 1 like, 1 subscribe, 1 city. That's all I'm asking. Now let's get into it. The morning sun spilled across the polished streets of River Oaks, Houston, like it was trying to convince the world that everything here was perfect. The storefronts gleamed behind freshly cleaned glass. The cars rolled past in slow, expensive rhythm, engines humming so quietly they didn't need to announce themselves. The sidewalks had been pressure washed at dawn, and the marble around the boutique entrances reflected the sunlight in sharp, almost aggressive flashes. Even the air seemed conditioned to a different temperature here, as if money could buy a softer kind of summer for the people who lived inside it. Daniel Brooks stood on the corner of a sidewalk that smelled faintly of jasmine and luxury cologne drifting out from the open door of a department store. To anyone passing by, he looked out of place. He wore a plain navy button-down shirt, dark jeans, and clean white sneakers without any logo a person would recognize. His watch was simple, the kind you could buy at any department store for under $100. His posture was relaxed. He didn't look like a man worth $460 million. That was the point. Inside the luxury watch boutique behind him, a young clerk glanced up from arranging a tray of timepieces under glass. Her eyes lingered on Daniel a moment too long, then quickly slid away when she realized he might catch her looking. Near the front door, a security guard in a dark suit adjusted his stance. Just slightly, just enough. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The shift in his weight, the way his hands moved closer to his belt, the way his chin lifted half an inch, all of it carried the same silent message Daniel had felt his entire life. We're watching you. Daniel didn't react. He never did anymore. He had learned, somewhere between the cramped 2-bedroom apartment he grew up in on the east side of Houston and the penthouse he now owned overlooking Buffalo Bayou, that reacting only gave people the satisfaction they were already expecting from him. So instead he simply turned, slid his hands into his pockets, and walked away from the boutique without ever stepping inside. Behind him, the tension released. The guard exhaled. The young clerk went back to rearranging watches that were already perfectly aligned in their velvet displays. Daniel kept walking. He passed boutiques and cafes and valet stands where men in red jackets opened doors for women carrying handbags that cost more than a year of his mother's rent had ever been. He passed restaurants with patios where people sipped $20 cocktails and laughed at jokes that didn't seem to require punchlines. He passed everything that River Oaks had to offer, and none of it touched him. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the polish of River Oaks softened into something more honest. The buildings grew shorter. The paint started showing its age. The signs hung at slightly uneven angles, the kind of angles that come from being installed by someone who couldn't afford to do it twice. A bus stop with a cracked plastic bench appeared on the corner, and the people standing near it looked like they had earned every line on their faces, every callus on their hands, every quiet exhaustion in their eyes. That's where he saw her. She was standing at the bus stop with a little girl, maybe 5 years old, holding her hand. The mother couldn't have been more than 29, 30 at the most. Her hair was pulled back into a tired bun that had probably started the day looking neater. Her shirt was a faded purple, washed so many times the color had given up halfway through. Her jeans had faded in uneven patches that no fashion designer would ever try to copy. And her shoes, white once upon a time, now closer to gray, had a small tear near the left toe that she had clearly been trying to hide for a while. She walked with a slight adjustment, a way of rolling her foot inward to keep the tear from catching on the pavement. It was a habit, the kind of habit you only build when you've been hiding something from the world for a long time. The kind of habit that nobody else would ever notice unless they were paying very close attention. Daniel noticed. He always noticed. Her name was Tanya Williams, 29 years old, a single mother who worked 2 jobs and still couldn't quite make rent on time. She lived in a 1-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of a building where the elevator had been broken for 6 months. She had moved to Houston 2 years ago, after her mother died, carrying everything she owned in 2 suitcases and a stroller. She didn't know any of this was about to happen to her. She didn't know a man was watching her from 40 feet away. She was just trying to catch a bus home from the laundromat with her daughter. The little girl beside her, Lily, was swinging her arm back and forth, tracing invisible shapes on the sidewalk with the tip of her shoe. "Mama, when's the bus coming?" she asked. "Soon, baby," Tanya said softly. She glanced down the street with the kind of quiet uncertainty that mothers learn to hide from their children. "Just a little longer." Lily nodded and went back to her shoe drawings. Trust in its purest and most fragile form. Daniel slowed his steps as he approached them. He didn't look directly at Tanya. He never looked directly at anyone during these moments. He had learned over years of doing this that direct eye contact changed the experiment, made people self-conscious, made them perform. But he saw everything anyway. The way she shifted Lily's weight without thinking about it. The way she checked her daughter's face before she checked the street. The way she touched the tear in her shoe with the back of her other foot, as if to remind herself it was still there. The torn shoe. The careful posture of someone who had learned to make herself small in public spaces. He kept walking. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. And then, without breaking stride, without looking back, he let the wallet slip from his fingers. It hit the pavement with a soft, heavy thud. Not loud enough to draw a crowd. Just loud enough to be real. Daniel didn't turn around. He walked forward, his pace unchanged, his face unreadable. But inside, something familiar began to stir. Not excitement, not hope, something colder than that. The quiet anticipation of a man who had run this exact experiment many times before and already knew exactly how it was going to end. Behind him, the world did what it always did. The first woman appeared within seconds. She was in her late 30s, dressed in a charcoal blazer cut sharp at the shoulders, heels striking the pavement with the kind of precision that comes from years of practice. Her phone was pressed against her ear, her voice clipped and fast, talking about a closing or a contract or some other thing that clearly mattered more to her than the sidewalk in front of her. Her eyes flicked down. She saw the wallet. There was no hesitation, no pause. No flicker of conscience or curiosity crossing her face. She stepped over it the way you'd step over a crack in the pavement and kept walking, her heels not even breaking rhythm. The wallet wasn't a moral test to her. It was an obstacle, and she had already moved past it before she had time to think about it. Daniel kept walking. He had expected nothing else. The second woman came a moment later, maybe 20 feet behind the first. She was older, closer to 55, moving more slowly, carrying a canvas grocery bag in one hand and a small folded umbrella in the other. She saw the wallet immediately. Her steps stopped completely. She looked down at it for a long moment, the kind of moment where you can almost watch the gears turning behind someone's eyes. Then she carefully bent down and picked it up. She opened it. Even from 20 feet away, Daniel could see her shoulders shift as she registered what was inside. $3,000 in crisp, neat $100 bills, 2 credit cards, a driver's license that read Daniel Brooks, and tucked behind the cash a photograph. She looked left. She looked right. A long, careful, deliberate look. The kind of look that wasn't about finding the owner. It was about making sure no one was watching her. Then she closed the wallet, slipped it down into her canvas grocery bag underneath the bananas and the loaf of bread, and continued walking like absolutely nothing had happened. Daniel's face didn't change. It never did anymore. He had seen this exact scene play out on sidewalks in 11 different neighborhoods across 3 different cities. People took. That was the pattern. That was the truth he had built his entire worldview around over the last 2 decades, after losing more than half of everything he had built to people he had trusted. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a second wallet. Identical to the first. Same brown leather, same hand stitching, same weight. Same $3,000 in crisp bills inside. Same photograph tucked behind the cash. He turned down the next block, the quieter one where Tanya stood with her daughter at the bus stop, and as he passed by them at a distance of about 8 feet, he let the second wallet fall. This time it landed just 4 feet in front of where Tanya was standing. Lily noticed it first. "Mama, what's that?" the little girl asked, pointing one small finger at the leather rectangle on the sidewalk. Tanya looked down. For a long second, she didn't move at all. Then she bent slowly, picking up the wallet with both hands like it was something fragile, something important. It was heavier than she expected. Real leather, hand-stitched, the kind of wallet that belonged to someone who didn't have to ask the price of anything. She opened it. The money caught the light. For a second, the whole world seemed to fade around her. The traffic, the heat, even Lily's soft breathing beside her. Just the green of those bills and the slow, dangerous math that started running through Tanya's mind without her permission. Rent. 2 months behind now. The landlord had stopped being polite 3 weeks ago and had started leaving notes taped to her door. Electric bill. Final notice. Taped to her door 3 days ago, right next to the rent notice, like they were keeping each other company. Groceries. She had enough food in the kitchen for maybe 2 more days, and that was only if she skipped breakfast again, the way she had been doing for almost 2 months now so that Lily could have cereal in the morning. Shoes. Her eyes flickered down to her own feet. The tear had widened that morning while she was walking to the bus. She had stuffed a small piece of cardboard inside to keep her sock from showing through. The cardboard was already getting damp from the heat. $3,000. It would fix everything. Not forever. Just for now. And right now was all she had ever really been able to think about anyway. Lily tugged at her sleeve gently. "Mama!" But Tanya wasn't looking at the money anymore. Her fingers had moved past the cash, past the cards, to something tucked deeper inside the wallet. A small square of glossy paper. A photograph. She pulled it out slowly. Her thumb brushed against the edge of it carefully, the way you handle something that belongs to someone else. A boy, maybe 10 years old, standing in front of a brick apartment building. His smile was wide, the kind of smile children give the world before the world has taught them anything yet. Beside him stood a woman, his mother clearly. Her hand rested on his shoulder, steady, protective, firm. She wasn't smiling. She looked tired in a way Tanya recognized immediately. The kind of tired that lives in your bones. The kind of tired that doesn't get fixed by sleep. The kind of tired that comes from working 2 jobs and still not quite making it. Tanya stared at that photograph longer than she had looked at the money. Behind her, half a block away, Daniel had stopped walking. Not completely. He didn't want to be obvious. Just enough to turn slightly toward a shop window and pretend to look at the display while he watched her reflection in the glass. He had expected the same pattern. The look, the calculation, the slow, careful disappearance of the wallet into a bag or a pocket. Instead, he was watching a woman stare at a photograph she had no reason to care about, holding it like it actually meant something to her. Tanya closed the wallet slowly. She looked down at Lily, who was watching her face with that quiet, patient attention only children seem capable of. "Mama," Lily whispered, "is it ours?" Tanya didn't answer right away. She took a breath. She closed her eyes for just a second, and when she opened them, she lifted her head and started scanning the street, looking from face to face, searching for someone who looked like they had just lost something important. A man in a charcoal suit walked past, phone to his ear, eyes locked on his shoes. A teenager with earbuds in walked by with his head nodding to a beat. A woman pushed a stroller, her gaze fixed somewhere 1,000 miles ahead. None of them looked lost. None of them looked like the kind of person who would carry a hand-stitched leather wallet with $3,000 and a photograph of a boy and his mother inside. "Excuse me, sir," Tanya called gently to a man passing by with a paper grocery bag. "Did you drop a wallet?" "Brown leather." He barely slowed down. He glanced at her, then at the wallet in her hand, then shook his head quickly. "No, that's not mine," he muttered, already moving past her toward the crosswalk. She tried another woman waiting at the bus stop. "Ma'am, did you lose a wallet?" The woman looked at her, then at the wallet, and her face hardened with suspicion. "No," she said sharper than necessary. "I didn't." She pulled her own purse closer to her side, as if Tanya's question might be the first step in some kind of scam. Tanya nodded politely, kept her voice gentle. "Okay, just checking. Sorry." She turned to a third person, a fourth, a man at the bus stop, a woman walking a small dog, a construction worker on his lunch break. Each time the answer was the same. "No, no, not mine, no." Across the street, Daniel had moved to a different position now, leaning against a lamppost just outside a closed dry cleaner, arms crossed, watching with an attention he hadn't given to anyone in years. He had expected her to break by now, to give up, to convince herself that she had tried hard enough, that fate had clearly given her this money for a reason, that nobody would blame her for keeping it after a sincere effort. That was always how it went. That was always how people justified themselves to themselves. But Tanya wasn't justifying anything. She was just looking. Lily shifted on her hip. The little girl had been remarkably patient, but now her energy was starting to fade. The Texas heat was settling into the afternoon, the kind of heat that doesn't break until well after sunset. "Mama, I'm hungry." Tanya closed her eyes for just a moment. "I know, baby. We'll eat soon. Can we get chicken tonight?" Tanya's throat tightened so hard she had to swallow twice before she could answer. She didn't answer at all, actually, because she didn't know if she could say yes. Because saying yes meant she had something to give her daughter that night. And right now, in her front pocket, she had $4.32. In her other hand, she had $3,000. She sat down slowly on the metal bench beside the bus stop. Lily curled into her side, half asleep already, exhausted from the heat and the walking. Tanya wrapped her arm around her daughter and held her close, kissing the top of her head almost without thinking. Then, slowly, she opened the wallet again. She didn't look at the money this time. Her fingers moved past it deliberately, straight to the photograph. She pulled it out and held it up to the light coming through the bus stop shelter. The boy with the wide smile, the mother with the tired eyes, the hand on the shoulder, the old brick building behind them with windows that had probably been painted shut for decades. Something about that woman's face. Something about the way her hand rested on her son. Something Tanya recognized down in a place she didn't usually let herself visit. She knew that look. She had seen it before in a mirror years ago. She had seen it on her own mother, Marlene Williams, a woman who had worked 2 jobs and stretched a single pot of rice and beans across 4 days and never once complained about her own hunger. "You eat first, baby. I already ate at work." That was what Marlene used to say every single time, even when Tanya was old enough to know it wasn't true. Her mother had been a hotel housekeeper by day and a cafeteria worker at a hospital by night, and she had spent her entire adult life giving without ever asking for anything back. She had died of cancer 2 years ago, at the age of 51, 6 months before her oldest daughter could make it back to Memphis to say goodbye. Tanya stared at the woman in the photograph and felt her chest tighten in a way the Texas heat couldn't explain. Whoever this woman was, whoever the boy in the picture had grown up to become, someone had loved them both very much. Someone had stood at a sink with sleeves rolled up and made sure they ate first. Someone had said the same kind of small lies about not being hungry. This wallet didn't belong to a stranger. It belonged to someone's son. Lily stirred against her shoulder. Mama, who is that in the picture? I don't know, baby, Tanya whispered. But someone loves them very much. Lily nodded slowly, satisfied, the way only a 5-year-old can be satisfied with an answer like that. Then she tucked her head back against her mother's shoulder and closed her eyes. Tanya slipped the photograph back into the wallet and closed it gently. Then she stood up, lifting Lily with her, adjusting the sleeping child against her hip. Across the street, Daniel hadn't moved. He had been watching her for almost 45 minutes now. He had watched her ask 13 different strangers if they had lost a wallet. He had watched her sit down with her daughter on a hot metal bench and look at a photograph instead of counting cash. He had watched a woman who needed $3,000 more than almost anyone else in Houston refuse to spend even a single second deciding whether to keep it. And he didn't understand it. For years, his system had worked perfectly. People took when they could. People chose themselves every single time. The world was a transaction, and the only way to survive it without bleeding out was to expect the worst from everyone and quietly verify it whenever you got the chance. But Tanya was breaking his system, and he didn't know what to do with that yet. He pulled the third wallet out of his pocket. Identical to the first two. He held it in his hand for a long moment, feeling the weight of it. His thumb brushed against the leather, against the place where the photograph rested inside. For just a second, he paused. Then he started walking again. A few blocks down, on a different stretch of sidewalk near a small farmer's market that was just starting to pack up for the afternoon, he let the third wallet fall near a woman waiting in line at a coffee cart. She was in her mid-40s. Comfortable clothes, not designer but not struggling either. A wedding ring on her finger. A simple gold necklace. She saw the wallet immediately. She bent down. She picked it up. She opened it. She looked left. She looked right. She slipped it into her purse and walked away from the coffee cart without ever ordering her drink. Daniel stood there in the heat. 3 wallets. 3 women. 2 had taken. 1 had stayed. The pattern was almost the same as every other test he had ever run over the last 20 years. Almost, but not quite, because somewhere on a hot metal bench 2 blocks back, a woman with a torn shoe and a sleeping child was still holding a wallet she could have kept. Still searching for an owner she would never find. Still teaching her daughter something more valuable than $3,000 could ever buy without ever saying a single word about what she was doing. Daniel turned around and started walking back toward her. Tanya was still on the bench when he approached. Lily had fallen completely asleep against her shoulder now. Her small hand curled tightly into the fabric of her mother's shirt. Tanya was looking down the street, her eyes scanning the crowd one more time, even though by now she must have known no one was coming back to look for the wallet. Daniel stopped a few feet in front of her. She looked up. There was no recognition in her eyes. Just the quiet, practiced caution of a woman who had learned somewhere along the way that men who approach you on the street usually want something, and rarely something good. "Tanya," he said. Her eyes narrowed. "How do you know my name?" Daniel realized his mistake half a second too late. He had read her name on the ID inside one of her old job applications that his assistant Devin had pulled together 2 days ago when planning the location for this experiment. He hadn't planned to use it. It had just slipped out, because somewhere in the last 45 minutes she had stopped being a stranger to him without him noticing it had happened. "I'm sorry," he said. "That came out wrong. I saw you earlier, asking people about a wallet." She studied him carefully for a long moment. Her eyes moved over his face, his clothes, his hands. She was looking for something, some signal that would tell her whether to trust him. Then she lifted the wallet she had been holding for almost an hour. "This one?" she asked. Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes." A long pause stretched between them. The sound of traffic. The distant honk of a horn. A baby crying somewhere down the block. "Is it yours?" she asked. Daniel looked at the wallet, then at her. He could have said yes. He could have taken it back from her, said thank you, offered her $100 reward, and walked away to add another data point to the spreadsheet on his laptop that cataloged 2 decades of human disappointment. But something stopped him. "It is mine," he said quietly. "But I didn't lose it." Tanya's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes shifted slowly, carefully. The way a door opens when someone isn't sure what's on the other side. "What does that mean?" Daniel took a breath. He hadn't planned to tell the truth. He had never told the truth in any of these experiments before. He had always taken the wallet back politely, offered a small reward to those who passed, and walked away. That was how the test was supposed to work. That was how he had run it for 20 years. But Tanya wasn't part of the experiment anymore. She had stepped outside of it somewhere around minute 20, when she started asking the 7th stranger if they had lost something. And lying to her now felt like something he wasn't willing to do. "I dropped it," he said. "On purpose." Tanya stared at him. The silence between them grew teeth. "You dropped it?" "Yes." "And you watched?" "Yes." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't move. She didn't even adjust Lily against her shoulder. She just looked at him with a kind of clear, quiet understanding that was somehow worse than anger. "You were testing people." It wasn't a question. Daniel nodded once. "Yes." The silence between them stretched again, longer this time. Lily shifted in her sleep, her small hand tightening on her mother's shirt as if she could sense something through the dream she was having. "To see who would take it," Tanya said. "Yes. And what happens if they do? When they take it? Then I know I was right." "Right about what?" Daniel paused. The honest answer was uglier than he wanted it to be, and he found himself wanting, for the first time in years, to soften something instead of state it plainly. But he had already started telling the truth, and he discovered, to his own surprise, that he couldn't seem to stop now. "About people," he said. "About what they do when they think nobody is watching them. About what they really are underneath everything they pretend to be in public." Tanya looked at him for a long, long moment. She didn't look angry. She looked tired. And underneath that tired, she looked disappointed. Not in him exactly. In something much larger than him. In a world that produced men with so much money and so little faith that they had to set traps on sidewalks just to confirm the worst things they already believed about strangers. "You don't know me," she said quietly. "I know I don't. And you don't know them either. The other women who took the wallets. You saw a moment. You didn't see a life." Daniel didn't have a response for that. He had spent his entire adult life believing that moments revealed lives. That under pressure, people showed you who they truly were beneath the performance. But standing in front of this woman, with a sleeping child on her shoulder and a torn shoe on her foot and $3,000 she had refused to spend a single second wanting, he wasn't so sure anymore. She held the wallet out to him with both hands. "I didn't return this because you dropped it," she said. "I didn't return it because you were watching me. I didn't even return it because of the money." Her eyes held his. "I returned it because it wasn't mine." She placed the wallet gently in his hand. Their fingers brushed for half a second. Warm. Real. The leather still slightly damp from the heat of her palm. Then she stood up, lifting Lily carefully with her, adjusting the little girl against her hip in one practiced, fluid motion that she must have done 10,000 times before. "I hope you found what you were looking for," she said. There was no sarcasm in her voice, no bitterness, no edge, just something quieter and worse than both of those things. The voice of a woman who had been disappointed by men before and had stopped expecting otherwise. She turned and started walking down the sidewalk, the tear in her shoe catching slightly on the pavement, her daughter sleeping against her shoulder, her free hand swinging at her side. Daniel stood there with the wallet warm in his hand and watched her go. The traffic moved past. The heat pressed down on his shoulders. The city did what the city always did. But something inside him had cracked open quietly, and he couldn't seem to close it back up again no matter how hard he tried. He opened the wallet slowly. The money was still there, untouched. The cards. The photograph. He pulled out the photograph and looked at it for a long time, longer than he had let himself look at it in years. The boy in the picture was him. 10 years old, standing in front of the brick apartment building on Lyons Avenue where he had grown up. The woman beside him was his mother, Lorraine Brooks, a woman who had worked 2 cleaning jobs and a night shift at a hospital cafeteria for 15 straight years to keep him fed and in school. A woman who had stretched $20 into a week of dinners more times than he could count. A woman who had hidden the tears in her own shoes the same way Tanya was hiding hers. A woman who had died of a sudden heart attack at the age of 53, exactly 6 months before Daniel sold his first software company for $43 million. She had never seen any of it. She had spent her entire adult life giving everything she had to a son who would grow up to become rich, and she had died before any of that money could ever reach her hands. Daniel had carried that photograph in every wallet he had owned for the last 22 years. Not because he liked looking at it, because he couldn't quite bring himself to put it away. He closed the wallet slowly. Down the street, Tanya was just a small figure now, walking toward the next bus stop with Lily asleep on her shoulder. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. She had already given him everything she intended to give. Daniel didn't know it yet, standing on that hot sidewalk in River Oaks with a wallet in his hand and a hollow place opening up behind his ribs. He didn't know that the test he had set up that morning hadn't really been a test of 3 women at all. It had been a test of 1 man, and for the first time in his entire adult life, he had failed it. If this story is already hitting you the way I think it is, take just 1 second right now to do me a favor. Hit that like button below. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't yet. And down in the comments, tell me the name of your city, the place you're listening from tonight. I read every single one. Now let's keep going, because what happens next is what really changes everything. Daniel didn't go home that night. He drove past the iron gates of his estate in River Oaks that opened automatically when his car got within 20 feet. Past the long curved driveway lined with oak trees that had been trimmed to within an inch of their lives by a landscaping company that charged him $40,000 a year just to make nature look obedient. Past the part of Houston that looked like the cover of an architecture magazine. He kept driving until the streets started to change, until the buildings shrank down to 2 and 3 stories, until the paint started peeling and the signs started hanging at angles, and the bus stops had cracked plastic benches and broken shade structures that didn't actually provide any shade. He pulled over near a small 4-story apartment building on the west side of town. He didn't know exactly why he had come here. He just knew this was the kind of building Tanya might live in, the kind of building his own mother had lived in. He sat in his car for almost an hour, the engine off, the windows down, listening to the sounds of a neighborhood that didn't pretend to be anything other than what it was. A baby crying through an open window 2 floors up. A radio playing salsa music from a balcony down the block. Someone laughing on a porch. A dog barking 3 buildings over. Then he drove home. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study on the 2nd floor of his estate, with the photograph of his mother on the antique desk in front of him, and he stared at it until the sun came up the next morning. His mother used to say something to him when he was a boy. He had forgotten about it for almost 20 years. It came back to him at 3:30 in the morning, sitting in a leather chair that had cost more than her annual salary had ever been. We don't take what isn't ours, Danny, especially when we're struggling, especially then. Because when you take what isn't yours when you're hurting, you become the person who hurt you. And there's already enough of those in the world. He had heard her say those exact words at least 100 times growing up. He had stopped really listening to them somewhere around the time he made his first $1 million at 26. He had told himself she had been beautiful but naive, that she didn't understand how the real world actually worked, that her morals were lovely in theory but completely unaffordable in practice for anyone who actually wanted to build something in this life. He sat in the dark of his study and realized, for the first time, that he had spent the last 20 years getting richer and poorer at the same time. He had been adding zeros to his bank account and subtracting something else from somewhere he couldn't quite name. The next morning, at exactly 7:15, he picked up his phone and called his assistant. "Devin." "Yes, sir. You're up early. I need you to find someone for me." "Sure. Name?" Daniel paused, pressing his fingers against his closed eyes. "Tanya. I don't have a last name. She has a daughter, maybe 5 years old. Daughter's name is Lily." She lives somewhere on the west side of Houston. Single mother. Probably works retail or service industry, maybe 2 jobs. She would have been near the corner of Westheimer and Kirby yesterday afternoon, around 2:30. She was wearing white sneakers with a tear in the left shoe and a faded purple shirt. There was a brief silence on the line. That's not a lot to go on, sir. I know it isn't. Find her anyway. Yes, sir. Devin, one more thing. Yes. This is important. I don't want her contacted. I don't want her approached. I just want to know who she is. Quietly, carefully, like she deserves. Another small pause. Understood, sir. Devin found her by the end of that same day. Her full name was Tanya Williams, 29 years old. She had a 5-year-old daughter named Lily. She worked 2 jobs, one as a waitress at a diner on Billionaire Street and another cleaning offices at a property management company 3 nights a week from 10 p.m. until 2 a.m. Her mother, Marlene Williams, had passed away from pancreatic cancer 2 years earlier in Memphis, Tennessee. Tanya had moved to Houston 6 months after her mother's death, carrying everything she owned in 2 suitcases and a stroller. She had no extended family that anyone could find. Lily's father had left when the girl was 8 months old and had never sent $1 of child support, despite 3 different court orders. She lived in a 1-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of a building where the elevator had been broken for over 6 months. Her landlord was a property management company that had filed eviction proceedings against her twice in the last year, both times withdrawn at the last minute when she had managed to scrape together what she owed. She was currently $340 behind on rent. Daniel read the file twice. Then he set the phone down on his desk and sat very still for a long time. She wasn't just a woman who had returned a wallet. She was almost exactly the woman his mother had been. 2 jobs, 1 child, no family nearby, a tear in her shoe she was trying to hide, a daughter who asked for chicken on Friday nights and didn't always get it, a landlord who had stopped being polite, and she had handed him back $3,000 on a sidewalk in River Oaks because, in her words, it wasn't hers. Daniel picked up the phone again and started making calls. He didn't tell anyone exactly why. He didn't explain the whole story to his lawyers or his accountants or his foundation director. He just gave instructions, signed off on accounts, and started moving pieces quietly into place. He had something to build, something he should have built 20 years ago, and it was finally time to start. 2 days later, Tanya was wiping down tables at the diner on Billionaire Street, her feet aching inside the same torn white sneakers she had been wearing on the sidewalk in River Oaks. The lunch rush had just ended. The booths were mostly empty now, and the only sound in the restaurant was the soft hum of the air conditioner working too hard against the Texas afternoon and the clinking of dishes from the kitchen. Her manager, a tired man named Carl with a coffee stain on his shirt that had been there for at least 2 days, walked over to her booth and held out a small white envelope. "Tanya, some guy left this for you this morning. Said it was important. Said to make sure you got it." She looked up from the table she was wiping. "What guy?" Carl shrugged. Didn't catch a name. Tall, dark hair. Looked rich but dressed plain. Didn't order anything. Just left this with the hostess and walked out. Tanya took the envelope slowly. Her hand was steady, but her stomach wasn't. She knew. Even before she opened it. She knew. Inside was a single sheet of paper with neat handwriting on it. An address downtown. A time 3 days from now at 4 in the afternoon. And one short line written underneath. "Please come. No obligation. No pressure. Just a conversation I owe you. Daniel." She folded the paper twice and slipped it into her apron pocket without saying anything. Carl was already walking back toward the kitchen, his attention pulled away by something on the grill. Tanya thought about that envelope for the next 3 days. She thought about it during her dinner shift at the diner. She thought about it at 10 p.m. when she dropped Lily off with the neighbor downstairs, Miss Doreen, an older woman who watched Lily on her cleaning nights for $15 and a hot meal on Sunday. She thought about it while she pushed her cart of cleaning supplies through silent office hallways at midnight, her own footsteps the only sound in those empty buildings. She thought about it while she rode the bus home at 2:30 in the morning with the cleaning solution still drying on her hands. She almost didn't go. She thought about everything that could go wrong. She thought about the kind of men who set up tests on sidewalks and watch strangers from across the street. She thought about what such a man might want from her now. She thought about all the ways she had seen rich men try to make themselves feel better at the expense of women who couldn't afford to say no. But on the third day, an hour before the meeting, she put on her cleanest shirt, brushed Lily's hair into 2 careful braids, and got on the bus heading downtown. She didn't tell herself why she was going. She just went. The building was a glass tower on the edge of downtown Houston, the kind of building Tanya had only ever seen from the inside while pushing a vacuum cleaner at 2 in the morning. She stood on the sidewalk in front of it for almost a full minute, looking up. Lily held her hand tightly, her little chin tilted back as she tried to see the top of the building. "Mama, the building is touching the sky. It's just a building, baby. It's not magic." But it kind of was, a little. They walked through the revolving glass door together. The lobby was cool and quiet, the kind of cool that comes from air conditioning so good you forget it's even on. A woman behind the front desk looked up as they approached. She wore a sharp blazer and had a small earpiece tucked behind her ear. Tanya was already preparing herself to be told she was in the wrong place. "I'm here to see Daniel Brooks," Tanya said, trying to keep her voice steady. "My name is Tanya Williams." The receptionist's face changed immediately, not in a bad way. In the way a face changes when it has been told to expect someone important. "Of course, Miss Williams. Mr. Brooks is waiting for you. 14th floor. The elevator on the right will take you straight up." The elevator was made of glass. Lily pressed her entire face against the wall and watched the city drop away beneath them as they rose. "Mama, look, the cars are tiny. The cars are like little ants." "I see, baby. I see them." Tanya's hand tightened slightly around Lily's. She didn't know what was waiting for her on the 14th floor. But whatever it was, she had decided on the bus ride over that she was going to walk into it standing up straight. The doors opened. Daniel was waiting in the small lobby beyond the elevator. He wasn't wearing a suit, just a plain white button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, dark slacks, and clean leather shoes. He looked smaller than he had on the sidewalk. More tired, more human. "Tanya, thank you for coming." "Really?" She nodded carefully. "Mr. Brooks." "Daniel, please." He glanced down at Lily and crouched slowly so he was at eye level with her. He didn't reach out. He didn't try to be charming. He just looked at her gently. "Hi. You must be Lily." Lily nodded once, watching him carefully from behind her mother's hip. "Your mom told me you like chicken. I had someone get some. Is that okay? It's in the kitchen. There's some apple juice too if you want." Lily looked up at her mother for permission. Tanya nodded once. Daniel stood up slowly. "There's a room down the hall with some toys and a TV. My assistant Devin can sit with her for a few minutes while you and I talk, if that's okay with you. He's good with kids. He has 3 of his own." Tanya hesitated. Then she crouched down to Lily's level and whispered something to her daughter. Lily nodded. Devin, a kind-looking man in his 40s, appeared in the hallway and offered Lily his hand. She took it after a moment, glancing back at her mother once before walking down the hall toward the smell of fried chicken. Daniel led Tanya in the opposite direction, down a quiet glass-walled hallway to a small conference room at the end. The room had a view of the entire skyline. Buffalo Bayou snaked through the glass in the distance. The afternoon sun cut through the windows in long, bright lines across the wooden table. On the table were 3 things: a shoebox, a small white envelope, a stack of papers held together by a single black clip. Tanya stopped in the doorway. Her eyes moved slowly from the shoebox to the envelope to the papers, then back to Daniel. "What is this? Please, sit down first. Then I'll explain everything. I promise." She sat. She didn't take her eyes off him. Daniel sat down across from her. He didn't reach for the items on the table. He folded his hands together and rested them in front of him. "Before I say anything else, I want to apologize to you. What I did on that sidewalk was wrong. It doesn't matter how I dress it up or what I tell myself my reasons were. I dropped that wallet to confirm something I already believed about people. That was disrespectful. To you, to the other women who walked by, and to a lot of people I don't even know. I'm sorry. Tanya didn't say anything. She just watched him. I'm not going to ask you to forgive me. That's not why I asked you to come here. I asked you to come because something you said to me on that sidewalk has been keeping me awake for the last 3 nights. You said I saw a moment, not a life. And you were right. About both of those women. And about me too, probably. He pushed the shoebox gently across the table toward her. Please, open this one first. Tanya hesitated. Then she lifted the lid carefully. Inside was a pair of plain white sneakers. Not designer. Not expensive. Not flashy. Just clean, sturdy, well-made walking shoes. Exactly her size. She didn't touch them. She just looked at them for a long moment. Then she looked back up at him. Mr. Brooks. Daniel. Please. Daniel. I don't need your charity. I know. That's why this isn't charity. Your shoes have a tear. I noticed it on the sidewalk. My mother had a tear in her shoes for almost 2 years when I was a kid because she kept buying me new ones every fall and never bought any for herself. Every time I looked at her feet, I felt guilty, and every time I tried to bring it up, she changed the subject. These shoes aren't a gift, Tanya. They're just shoes. You can take them or you can leave them. I won't be offended either way. Tanya's jaw was tight. She closed the lid of the shoebox slowly. She didn't push it away. She didn't pull it closer. Daniel slid the envelope toward her next. Open that one too. Please. She picked it up. Opened it slowly. Inside was cash. She counted it without meaning to. Her hands knew that motion. 300. 320. 340. Her breath caught. She looked up sharply. How did you know that number? Daniel didn't look away from her. I had someone find out. I'm not going to lie to you, Tanya. I had your information looked into after we met on the sidewalk. I know your address. I know where you work. I know that you've moved twice in the last year and that you're $340 behind on rent right now. I know your mother's name was Marlene and that she worked 2 jobs in Memphis until she got sick. I know almost everything I could find out about you in 3 days. Tanya's hands had begun to tremble, not from fear, from something deeper than fear. From the strange, almost painful experience of being seen by someone who had no obligation to look. You had no right to do that. You're right. I didn't. I'm sorry for that too. There was a silence then. Long, heavy. The kind of silence you can't fill with anything except the truth. That money in the envelope, Daniel finally said. That's not from me. Not the way you're thinking. That's from the wallet you returned. There were $3,000 inside it. You handed it all back to me on that bench, and I went home and I sat with that wallet in my hand for 2 days, and I realized I could not, in good conscience, just put that money back in my account like nothing had happened. So $340 of it is yours. Exactly enough to make you current on your rent. Not as a gift. Not as charity. As what you earned simply by being who you already are. You can call it whatever you need to call it in order to accept it. A finder's fee. A reward. Correction. Whatever lets you take it without it costing you your dignity. Tanya didn't speak. She slowly folded the envelope closed and set it back on the table. She didn't push it away. She didn't pull it closer either. And the papers? She finally asked. Daniel pushed the small stack across the table. This is the part you can absolutely say no to. And nothing will change between us if you do. Not the shoes. Not the envelope. Not anything. She picked up the papers. She read them slowly, line by line, taking her time. Daniel didn't rush her. He didn't speak. He didn't even move, except to occasionally glance down at his own hands folded on the table. The papers were an offer. A real one. The kind of offer that doesn't come with hidden hooks underneath. Daniel was starting a foundation. He had filed the paperwork 2 days after their encounter on the sidewalk. It was being incorporated as a Texas nonprofit, and it had already been seeded with $12 million of his personal money, with another $15 million committed to come in over the next 3 years. The mission of the foundation was simple. It existed to support single parents in Houston who were one missed paycheck away from losing everything. Emergency rental assistance, free childcare, job training programs, help finding better apartments, health insurance navigation, legal aid for custody and child support issues. The foundation was being named the Lorraine Brooks Foundation, and he was offering Tanya a job, Director of Community Outreach. A real salary, $68,000 a year to start, with full health insurance for her and Lily and a small relocation stipend to help her move into a better apartment. The job would have her doing exactly what she had been doing on that sidewalk. Looking, seeing, talking to women who looked like she used to look, finding the ones the system kept missing, building bridges between the foundation's resources and the people who needed them most. The papers also included a clause she had to read 3 times to be sure she was reading it correctly. The clause stated that nothing in the offer was contingent on any kind of personal relationship between her and Daniel Brooks, that he would not be her direct supervisor, that she would report to an independent executive director who had not yet been hired, and that she had the right to terminate her employment at any time without cause or explanation and keep the relocation stipend. She set the papers down on the table. She didn't say anything for a long moment. "Why me?" she finally asked. Daniel was quiet for a long time before he answered. "Because you were the only person on that sidewalk who saw the photograph before the money. And because the only reason I am sitting across from you in this room is because of a woman who looked a lot like you. She raised me alone. She worked 2 jobs and stretched $20 bills into miracles I didn't even appreciate at the time. She had a tear in her shoe for 2 years because she kept buying mine instead. She died at 53, 6 months before I sold my first company. She never saw any of this. She gave her whole life away to a son who became rich, and she died before any of that money could ever reach her hands." He looked at the photograph still resting in the open wallet on the table between them. The boy and the woman in front of the brick building. "For 20 years I have been carrying her picture in my wallet and convincing myself I was building this life in her honor. But I haven't been. I've been building it to prove she was wrong about the world. That her morals were beautiful but unaffordable. That kindness like hers was a luxury most people couldn't afford to practice." His voice was quiet but steady. "You showed me she was right. You stood on that sidewalk for 45 minutes with a torn shoe and a sleeping child, and you handed me back $3,000 because, in your words, it wasn't yours. My mother used to say those exact words. The exact same words. I forgot them somewhere along the way. You reminded me." He looked back up at her. "I'm not offering you this job because I feel sorry for you, Tanya. I'm offering it to you because you are the only person I have met in 20 years who I am completely sure will do this work the right way. I don't need you to save me. I need you to do something my mother would have been proud of. Something I should have started building a long time ago." Tanya didn't speak. She looked down at the papers, then at the envelope, then at the shoebox. 3 different answers to 3 different questions. "What happens if I say no?" she asked quietly. "Nothing," Daniel said immediately. "You take the shoes. You take the money you earned. You walk out that door and nothing changes between us. No follow-up. No pressure. No one calls you. You go back to your life and we never speak again, unless you want to." He paused. "But I hope you say yes. I hope it more than I have hoped for anything in a long time." Tanya looked at him for a very long time. Her face didn't give anything away. Then, slowly, she reached out and pulled the shoebox closer. She lifted the lid again. She took the shoes out carefully. She held them in her lap. They smelled like new leather and clean rubber. The laces were tied in soft, neat bows. "My mama used to say something too," Tanya said softly, almost to herself. "She used to say, when the right door finally opens, you walk through it. You don't waste time at the threshold asking why." She set the shoes back in the box gently. "I'll try." That was all. 2 words. Quiet, careful, honest. Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "That's all I'm asking." "Thank you." Tanya stood up. She picked up the shoebox, the envelope, and the stack of papers. At the doorway, she paused and turned back. "Daniel." "Yes." "What was your mother's name again?" "Lorraine." Lorraine Brooks. Tanya nodded once, slowly. That's a good name. She would have liked her name on a building. Mamas don't get their names on buildings often enough. She walked out of the room. If this story has reached your heart by now, please take just 1 second to like this video and to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. And drop the name of your city in the comments below. I want to know where you're sitting tonight listening to this story. Now let me show you what happened next, because the best part is still ahead. Tanya started at the foundation the following Monday. The first few weeks were slow and uncertain in a way that nothing in her life had ever been before. She didn't know how to be the person on the other side of the desk. She had spent her whole adult life being the one asking for help, the one filling out forms, the one waiting in lines at offices that smelled like old carpet and air freshener, and now suddenly she was the one offering help. She didn't have a college degree. She didn't have a background in nonprofit management or social work. She had never taken a single class in human services or community organizing. What she had was something that turned out to be more valuable than any of those things. A complete, unfakeable, lived understanding of what it felt like to stand at a bus stop with a torn shoe and a hungry child and no idea how you were going to get through the week. She had the ability to walk into any room in Houston and immediately tell, just from the way a woman held her shoulders, whether that woman was 3 weeks from eviction or 3 months from it. That turned out to be the only qualification that actually mattered. The first week, she didn't have an office. She didn't even have a desk. Daniel was still finalizing the lease on a small ground floor space on the west side. So Tanya worked from coffee shops, church basements, park benches, and the picnic table behind the diner where she used to wait tables. She started by reaching out to women she already knew. The single mother 2 doors down from her old apartment. The waitress who had covered her shift twice last year. The mother from Lily's preschool who always looked like she was about to cry in the drop-off line. She didn't lead with the foundation. She didn't lead with money. She didn't lead with anything that sounded like a sales pitch. She just sat down and said, "Tell me what's happening. Let's see what we can do." Word spread quickly through neighborhoods Daniel had never set foot in. By the end of the 3rd week, Tanya had connected 11 families with emergency rental assistance. By the end of the 2nd month, she had helped enroll 17 children in subsidized after-school programs and connected 9 mothers with free childcare so they could pick up extra shifts at their jobs. By the end of the 3rd month, the foundation had paid off the back rent of 26 families and saved at least 4 of them from active eviction proceedings. They opened the small office on the west side at the start of the 4th month. The lease was on a corner building that had previously been a pawn shop. The paint was fresh. The windows were new. Inside there was a small reception area with comfortable chairs, 2 offices, a meeting room with a long table, and a children's corner with toys and books for the kids of women who came in to talk. Tanya had picked out the toys herself. Daniel showed up on opening day in jeans and a plain shirt, carrying a box of donuts and another box of coffee from a local shop down the street. He didn't give a speech. He didn't cut a ribbon. He helped move filing cabinets and chairs for 4 hours alongside 3 volunteers he had never met before. When a local reporter showed up halfway through the afternoon to do a piece on the new Community Resource Center, Daniel quietly slipped out the back door and let Tanya do the interview. He wasn't trying to disappear from his own foundation. He was trying to let it belong to the people it was built for. Lily started going to a small private preschool near the new office. Tanya could afford it now. She could afford a lot of things she hadn't been able to afford before. She had moved out of the 4th floor walk-up apartment and into a 2-bedroom unit on the ground floor of a clean, well-maintained building closer to Lily's school. Lily had her own room now, with a real bed instead of a mattress on the floor, and a small dresser with drawings taped to the front of it. But the thing Tanya found most strange about her new life was that none of those material things felt like the biggest change. The biggest change was harder to name. It was the way she walked now. Not faster, not prouder, just steadier. It was the way she stopped hiding the parts of herself that the world had spent years telling her to hide. It was the way Lily looked at her in the morning and saw a mother who was still tired sometimes, still carrying things, but no longer afraid in the way she used to be afraid. It was the way she could say yes to chicken on a Friday night without doing math in her head first. Daniel changed too, though it took longer. Changes in people who have spent 20 years building walls always take longer than changes in people who have spent 20 years just trying to survive. He stopped running tests. He didn't drop any more wallets on any more sidewalks in any more neighborhoods. He didn't run any more spreadsheets on the patterns of human disappointment. He let those files sit in a folder on his laptop and he stopped opening them. He still walked through River Oaks sometimes. He still felt the small shifts of security guards adjusting their stances when he walked into stores, the quick glances of clerks reaching for nothing in particular. But he didn't carry the same weight around any of that anymore. He had stopped needing the world to prove anything to him. He had stopped needing strangers to confirm what he had decided to believe about them. He started sleeping better. Not perfectly, but better. He started having dinner at his own kitchen table instead of at his desk. He took Devin and Devin's 3 kids to a baseball game one Sunday afternoon, the first time he had been to a baseball game in 11 years. He started visiting the foundation's office on the west side once a week, mostly to listen. Sometimes to fix things that didn't really need fixing. Mostly just to sit in the children's corner and read with whoever's kid happened to be there that morning while their mother filled out forms at the front desk. Sometimes one of those kids would ask him what his name was. "Danny," he would say, smiling. "My name is Danny." He hadn't used that name in 20 years. 6 months after that afternoon on the sidewalk in River Oaks, the foundation opened its first full community center. It stood on a corner of a street that had seen too many empty promises over the years. The lot had once held a check-cashing business, then a vacant building, then a temporary used car lot, then nothing at all for almost 3 years. Now it held 2 stories of clean brick, fresh paint, new windows, and warm yellow light spilling out onto the sidewalk in the early evening. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't perfect. The architects had not designed it to win any awards. But it was real, and it was solid, and it was built for the people who lived within walking distance of it. The first floor had a free childcare wing with 2 large bright rooms for kids, a small kitchen that served 3 free meals a day to anyone who needed them with no questions asked, a job training room with 12 donated computers, and a small clinic where 2 volunteer nurses came in 3 days a week to do basic health screenings and vaccinations for free. The second floor had counseling offices, a legal aid clinic staffed by pro bono lawyers from 3 different downtown firms, and a community meeting room that could be reserved for free by any neighborhood group that wanted to use it. The opening was a quiet affair. Daniel had specifically asked that there be no press, no mayor cutting a ribbon, no camera crews, no speeches from any politicians looking for a photo opportunity. Just families and neighbors and the soft hum of a community gathering around something that had been built for them instead of around them. There was food on long folding tables, music from a small speaker, kids running around the parking lot in the early evening cool, a grandmother sitting on the new front steps, telling another grandmother about a doctor's appointment she could finally afford to keep. Tanya stood near the front entrance, wearing the white sneakers Daniel had given her exactly 6 months ago. They were worn in now, comfortable, hers. They had walked hundreds of miles through neighborhoods that the city had forgotten about, knocking on doors, sitting on stoops, listening to stories that had been waiting decades to be heard. Lily stood beside her, holding her hand, looking up at the building with wide eyes. She had grown almost an inch in the last 6 months. Her hair was longer now, pulled back in 2 careful braids that she had started doing herself in the morning. "Mama, is this ours?" Tanya smiled. "No, baby. It belongs to everyone. Even me. Even you. Even the kids who don't live in our building. Even them. Especially them." Daniel stood a few steps behind them, hands in his pockets, watching but not leading. He had asked specifically that no one introduce him as the founder. He had asked that no one mention his last name. He just wanted to be a man in a plain shirt at a neighborhood event, watching something good happen to people who deserved good things. Tanya turned to step inside the front door, and then she stopped. Just inside the entrance, on the wall to the right of the main door, was a small bronze plaque. She hadn't noticed it during any of the construction tours over the last 2 weeks. It must have been mounted that very morning, while she was at her own apartment helping Lily get dressed for the opening. She walked closer to it slowly. Her fingers brushed the edge of the metal, The bronze was still slightly cool to the touch. Then she read the words engraved on it. The Lorraine Brooks Community Center. In honor of the mothers who gave everything and asked for nothing. In honor of Lorraine Brooks and Marlene Williams, and every mother whose name does not appear on a building like this one. Tanya stood very, very still. Lily looked up at her. Mama? That's Grandma's name on there. That says Marlene Williams. That's Grandma. Tanya nodded slowly. Her voice didn't come right away. When it did, it was barely above a whisper. Yes, baby, it does. Tears filled her eyes. Not falling, just present. She turned and looked across the small entryway. Daniel was standing about 10 feet away, hands still in his pockets, watching her with an expression she had never seen on him before. Not pride, not relief, something quieter than both of those things, something closer to peace. She walked over to him slowly. Lily held onto the hem of her mother's shirt. You put her name on it, Tanya said. You put my mother's name on this building. I asked Devin to find her name and dates when I asked him to write the dedication. I hope that was all right. I wanted her here too. She deserved to be here. Tanya wiped at her eye with the back of her wrist. You didn't have to do that. I know I didn't. Why did you? Daniel looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at the plaque. Then at Lily. Then back at Tanya. Because that day on the sidewalk, you were not just one mother. You were every mother who ever stood at a bus stop with a torn shoe and made the right choice when nobody was watching. And there are a lot more names that should be on that wall than just our two. We'll add them as we find them. Tanya let out a breath that was halfway to a laugh and halfway to a sob. My mama would have liked you, Daniel. My mama would have liked you too. She would have looked at you on that sidewalk and known you before I did. They stood there for a long moment, not speaking, because there was nothing else that needed to be said. The sounds of the community center drifted out through the open door behind them. A child laughing in the kitchen. A woman saying thank you to a volunteer at the front desk. A radio playing soft music somewhere on the second floor. Someone clapping for someone else. A long time ago, on a polished sidewalk in River Oaks, a billionaire dropped 3 identical wallets in the middle of a busy afternoon to prove a theory he had been building in his head for 20 years. He wanted to confirm what he already believed about people, that they would take when they could, that they would choose themselves every time. That kindness was a beautiful illusion most people couldn't afford to practice. 2 women confirmed everything he believed. But the third one, a single mother named Tanya Williams, with a tear in her left shoe and a sleeping 5-year-old daughter on her shoulder, didn't just hand back a leather wallet with $3,000 in it. She handed back something he had lost a very long time before that afternoon. Something he didn't even know he had been carrying around the absence of for 2 decades. She handed back the belief that the woman who raised him had been right about the world. She handed back the truth his mother had whispered to him 100 times when he was a boy and had stopped listening to somewhere around his first $1 million. That we do not take what isn't ours. Especially when we are struggling. Especially then. Some people pass by what doesn't belong to them without even noticing it. Some people quietly take it when they think no one is watching. And once in a great while, somewhere in the middle of a busy street on a hot summer afternoon, someone stops. Someone bends down and picks it up with both hands. Someone holds it carefully, like it matters, and spends an hour walking around in the heat asking strangers if they have lost something important. Not because anyone is watching them. Not because anyone will ever now. But because that is simply who they are when no one is looking. Those are the people who change the world. Not because they set out to change it. Not because they have any plan to. But because they refuse, even when no one would blame them for refusing, to become anything other than who they already are. If you have made it all the way to the end of this story tonight, I want to ask you to do 3 small things before you go. First, give this video a like. It really does help more people find these stories. Second, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. There are more stories like this coming, and I would love to see you here for the next one. And third, down in the comments, tell me the name of your city, the town you are listening from tonight, wherever you are in the world. Type the number 1 if you would have returned the wallet. Type the number 0 if you think you might have kept it. No long explanations needed. Just a number and your city. I read every single comment, every single name, every single city. I want to know who is here tonight. And before you go, ask yourself one quiet question. The next time you find something on the ground that does not belong to you, the next time the world hands you a small chance to be the person nobody is watching, what kind of person are you going to be? Because somewhere, in some city, on some sidewalk you have not walked down yet, a small bronze plaque is waiting to be written. And the only thing that will ever decide whose name gets engraved on it is what you do when you think no one is watching. I will see you in the next story. Take care of each other out there. Good night.